Good morning. I think a few folks are probably in the post-Halloween coma or trapped on the I-10, but hopefully a few more will start filtering in here, but we'll get going anyway. Thank you so much for joining us for Trade Week. It's been a great week so far, some really great dialogues on traditional and non-traditional trade sectors. But we're here this morning to talk about destination healthcare and tourism and the purposeful collision of these two sectors and what it means for the New Orleans and also the Louisiana trade economy. Our moderator today is Kim Singletary, managing editor of Biz New Orleans magazine. Kim is an award-winning writer, editor, and public relations practitioner. She has worked primarily in magazine publishing and is a freelance writer for both corporate and nonprofit clients for over 17 years. For the past 4 years, she has been a contributing writer at the New Orleans Advocate, the city's only daily newspaper, and currently serves as the managing editor of Biz New Orleans magazine, the latest publication from Renaissance Publishing. Biz New Orleans is a monthly magazine that covers the businesses industry of Southeast Louisiana. So please help me in welcoming your moderator today, Kim Singletary.
Thank you, Caitlin. So welcome to Going Gaga Over Global. We are going to have it.
I was expecting a guest appearance, but we're not going to get
I know,
Gaga
no
now.
Gaga. Well, not yet. She's probably stuck on the 10. So this is a pretty casual conversation with some amazing people here. But we're going to start out just talking a little bit about destination healthcare. New Orleans is fortunate enough that we have two very booming industries, healthcare and tourism. Everybody, I think, is familiar with the fact that in 2015, UMC opened, followed a year later by the VA Medical Center. So that's a couple of $1 billion worth of investment right there. We have a $100 million facility that was announced in April that'll be coming to treat cancer through proton therapy, which promises fewer side effects than radiation therapy. And then we, of course, have Ochsner, the largest not-for-profit health system in Louisiana and also the largest employer. So Mr. Thomas is here, so I'm going to let him go into all the expansion that they've been doing. On the tourism side, we're booming. We broke records last year, both in terms of visitors and the amount of money that they spent in the state. We have been voted for the 4th consecutive year. New Orleans was named among the top 5 cities in the world by Travel and Leisure magazine. And among the accolades we've received, Best Food City, America's Favorite City, Coolest City, Most Romantic City, and so much more. If you put our region's biggest strengths together, you get healthcare and tourism. So that leads to, obviously, destination healthcare. And that's something that a lot of cities around the country are really pushing for, including ours. So we're going to talk today about what we're doing, where we're at, and how we move forward. So with us today, our panel includes Michael Hecht. He is president and CEO of Greater New Orleans, Inc., the economic development organization for Southeast Louisiana. GNO Inc.'s mission falls broadly into 2 categories: business development, attracting and growing businesses, and product development, creating better business conditions. Under Michael's leadership, GNO Inc. was recently named the #2 economic development organization in the United States by Business Facilities magazine. Michael holds an MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he was a member of the public management program, and an undergraduate degree from Yale University, magna cum laude. Recently, Michael has been recognized as one of the 25 most powerful people in the 1012 corridor, a New Orleans Innovator of the Year, and one of 10 people who make a difference in the South. Please join me in welcoming Michael Hecht.
The 1012 corridor.
I
That's
know.
serious stuff.
Sounds impressive, huh?
Not to these people, I know.
So our next panelist is Warner Thomas. As president and CEO of Louisiana's largest nonprofit academic healthcare system, Warner Thomas is responsible for Ochsner Health System's overall strategic growth and development. In the wake of Hurricane Katrina, Ochsner invested in the community by acquiring 6 hospitals and developing strategic partnerships and affiliations to grow its presence across Louisiana and the Gulf South. Thomas joined Ochsner in 1998 and served for 14 years as Ochsner's president and chief operating officer. Thomas received his master's degree in business administration in 1994 from Boston University Graduate School of Management and an undergraduate degree in accounting and computer information systems from New Hampshire College in Manchester, New Hampshire. He believes in setting industry best practices and forging innovative partnerships with major companies, including General Electric. He spearheaded Innovation Ochsner to create future health innovations to revolutionize patient-centered care. In 2014, his expertise was nationally recognized through his appointment to advise Congress on the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Warner Thomas. And our third panelist is Mr. Mark Romig. In 2011, Mark Romig was appointed Chief Executive Officer of the New Orleans Tourism Marketing Corp., the city's leisure travel promotion agency. NOTMC is a private economic development corporation created under Louisiana state law to foster jobs and economic growth by developing the tourism industry in New Orleans. Prior to this appointment, Romig served as the Vice President of Marketing and Public Relations for the Delta Division of HCA Healthcare and spent 16 years at Peter A. Mayer Advertising. He is a past chairman of the Idea Village, a nonprofit that nurtures entrepreneurial ventures, and a former chairman of the All-State Sugar Bowl Committee. A native New Orleanian, Romig graduated from Brother Martin High School and from the University of New Orleans School of Business Administration with a Bachelor of Science from the Hotel, Restaurant, and Tourism Administration Division. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mark Romig. So we're going to start with Michael today, but I want to remind our panelists that you are free to answer any of the questions offered by either me or the audience, as well as ask questions to each other and answer each other as well. We're trying to create a rich dialogue here this morning. So Michael, GNO Inc. has made destination healthcare a goal for the city. Can you talk a bit about why that is?
I think that destination healthcare is probably one of the less understood but most powerful potential economic drivers for any community, but now particularly for us here in Greater New Orleans. The essential difference is that if you build a hospital and it's serving the local community, that's very important, and I would call that community development or community health. And that's obviously important, and that ties into economic development because it's very important to have a healthy workforce. But if you can begin to serve the population outside of the region, outside of the state, outside of the country, I think Ochsner serves people from something close to 90 countries, then that's economic development as opposed to community development, because the whole essence of economic development is you want other people's dollars. If you're just taking dollars from within your political jurisdiction, you're just kind of moving the eggs around the plate. And so it might be, good in other ways, but you're not creating net new dollars, bringing net new wealth into the economy. So destination healthcare, where you come up with a specialty that is regionally, nationally, globally known. Again, like some at Ochsner, like neurology or nephrology or organ transplant. That's when you begin to really become an economic engine. And to kind of give you the example that most people in the South know the best, if you look at the Texas Medical Center and all the institutions there, MD Anderson being the one that's best known, 25% of all of the hotel stays in Houston are people who are in Houston for medical care. And so that's how it directly translates into dollars and tax and wealth for the region. So we need to keep investing in our specialties here at institutions like Ochsner, at the teaching hospitals as well. Also working with partners like the Saints in the NFL, who are working on traumatic brain injury, Steve Gleason with ALS, to develop these specialties. I personally think that neurology is one of the really interesting ones, because neurodegenerative diseases, I'm getting nods from the Ochsner crew, good. The population over 65 is going to double by 2050. Diseases like Alzheimer's are unfortunately going to be the growth disease of the next generation. There's no cure for it right now. As far as I'm aware, there's no place that really has that market cornered or known like a Cleveland Clinic with heart or cancer care. And I think that we could actually, this is just my non-medical opinion, that could be one of the things that we're known for, that people come to from around the country, particularly come to from Latin America. And again, that's other people's dollars coming here, and that's economic development.
Wonderful. So what does it mean for business and workforce growth to be a destination city?
There's obviously a huge range of jobs that would be associated with destination healthcare. You've got the primary care, you've got all of the other allied health that's associated with it. Then you've got all the support industries, which is everything from laundry to cater to real estate, and again to tourism, because the two intersect. One difference I should make when we're talking about destination healthcare, I'm differentiating that, I think, from, I guess, what I call medical tourism. So we're not talking about going to Brazil for a butt lift. We're talking about coming to New Orleans for cancer care, for vascular care, for a neurological syndrome. And that's actually the life-critical type of work, which is more intense. You get longer stays, bigger spends. That's, I think, really the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think if you think about job creation with healthcare, so if you look at New Orleans, and this just came out in the last month or so, and I shared this with Michael. So this came out in Becker's Healthcare, that they looked at job creation by city in the U.S. from a healthcare perspective, and New Orleans was #1 in the country from 2007 to 2017 in job creation in healthcare from a percentage growth perspective. Yeah, about 70%, and that's those are good paying jobs. It generates economic development for everyone around the city. I mean, Ochsner today has about a $2 billion economic impact in the region, annually. So I think we need to think about healthcare as an economic driver and a job creator. And it's if you go back to post Katrina when Ochsner purchased the Tenet hospitals, all of the back office positions for Tenet were outside of Louisiana. They were in Texas. So when we purchased those hospitals, not only did we keep those hospitals, grow the jobs there, we insourced about 1,000 jobs from a back office perspective, into the city that were in other places. So, and as Ochsner grows, and we're looking at growth kind of outside of Louisiana as well, inevitably many of those back office functions will come here, to Louisiana. So I think we need to think about healthcare in a very different way. Last year, as you mentioned, Ochsner is a destination healthcare center. We, as Michael indicated, we took care of people from almost 90 different countries, every state in the U.S. And it's not just folks that are, no offense, tourists that are coming to town. I mean, if you look at our cancer program, we had 30 different states that people came to us for cancer. If you look at neurosciences, we had 40 different states that people came to us for neuroscience care. So it is happening, and it's part of the history and the heritage of Ochsner. If you go back to when Ochsner was founded in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, Ochsner was the place to go for Central and South America. And we're really trying to rekindle many of those relationships, as well as build new relationships in the Middle East. We have a great partnership with the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia, which is now in its 9th year. It's very successful, where essentially U.S. students are going to Queensland in Brisbane for the first 2 years of medical school, and then come back to Ochsner for their 3rd and 4th training. Yeah, I know. Go to Australia for 2 years, then come back to New Orleans. It's not hard to recruit to, trust me. So it's a lot of different things, and I think that at the end of the day, it starts with people and building the team. And I think what is sometimes mistaken is it's not about buildings, it's about people. And we've worked for decades to build the right people and the right teams and the right structure. It's why our liver transplant program is #1 in the country from outcomes and the size of the program. And we have people come from all over. And it is about the people that make the difference.
Can I just add one thing to that? There's a point that Warner made that I think is so important. I want to kind of reemphasize it. Those back office jobs that are coming with a tenant and that you have because Ochsner is headquartered here, that's the key to our future. Because y'all might have seen an article in another somewhat inferior journal a few weeks ago talking about the cost of living in New Orleans. And the article was factually wrong, but the feeling was right. The fact that they got wrong is that New Orleans, and I mean this as a region, is actually still a very kind of middle of the road in terms of cost of living, where we compare with Dallas and Nashville and Austin. Our problem is that people don't make enough money. There's not enough wealth. We have a wealth problem, not a cost problem. And so when you have all these young people that have come here, we're still #5 in the country for millennial in-migration, and then they have to get their real job because they're done doing Teach for America and they've got to start their family. We just don't have enough of these back office jobs, the accounting jobs, the sales jobs, the administrative jobs that people can go and take and build a career off of. And the reason is that going back to the 80s, we kind of scared off a lot of our corporate headquarters due to this combination of patronage and parochialism. And so now today, Louisiana only has 3 Fortune 1000 companies. Arkansas has 7. So organizations like Ochsner being here and being successful and not just having highly paid doctors, but having all the back office, it's not as sexy, it doesn't make the headlines, but I promise you that is the heart of the matter. That's the meat. That's our success.
So with destination healthcare, being that the price is not as much of an issue, it seems like people are looking for 3 things. They're looking for culture, a place to go, climate, and they're looking for care. We obviously have those top 2, and then on the 3rd level, that's something that Ochsner is really working on. How are you looking at recruitment? Are you having problems bringing people to New Orleans, the top of the top, or how are you kind of tackling that?
So I would say from recruiting talent, as far as physicians and clinical talent, we don't have a problem with that. I think people view New Orleans as an attractive place to go to. I think it's a city that has a great reputation. I think frankly, I think that once people get here, they have their perception of what New Orleans is, and then when they get here, they have a very different perception of reality, after they've spent some time here. So we don't have trouble recruiting people here. I think the other thing is that, Ochsner, you may or may not know this, so, we have there's 12 specialties that are ranked nationally for U.S. News and World Report. 4 of our programs are in the top 50 in the country. There's no other entity in Louisiana, Mississippi, or Arkansas that has specialties in the top 50. And for the other 8, 7 of the other 8 were in the top 75. So people want to go to those types of organizations. They want to go to the best of the best in the country because these are talented folks that can go anywhere. And they could go to Houston, Dallas, New York, LA, Chicago. They come here because they want to be part of something bigger. They want to make a difference, and they feel like Ochsner is the place to do that. The other thing is that we've made investments now in pediatric care because we really haven't had destination pediatrics, and now we have one for the first time in history. We have a specialty heart surgery and heart care that's in the top 50 for pediatrics, and we brought an amazing heart team from Carolinas Healthcare in Charlotte, North Carolina. They came to Ochsner to join they were heart surgeons. They joined our cardiologists that we have here to build a destination pediatric heart care center, and we'll build on that in other areas as well. But that's why I come back to it's about the people, and you got to be able to recruit the right people and build the right programs around them. But we have not had a major issue recruiting physicians. Now, nurses and other professional skill positions is a challenge for us, and the workforce pipeline, the universities, and having enough folks that are being trained in those disciplines is a real challenge for us. Right now, we recruit for nursing and other clinical specialists all over the country because we just don't have a big enough pipeline in New Orleans. So we've got to continue to build the workforce initiatives in our city to be attractive to more organizations who want to come here.
Is that something Ochsner is actively involved in? Are there any kind of partnerships with some of the universities?
We are actively involved with it. So we're a training center for all of the nursing schools around. LSU, Holy Cross, Delgado. We train for all of those schools. We're actually building in partnership our own nursing school. So we're actually going to build a nursing school on Jefferson Highway that will complement what's here. It's because we just don't have enough nurses today. We also are building partnerships. We're actually looking at it right now with Delgado. We're looking at partnerships with UNO to essentially build out more skills degrees and try to get more folks into those programs. We're part of the Mayor's Workforce Initiative, and with the STRIVE program to essentially take folks out of the STRIVE program, get them into our organization, and help them start to build a career and to build up their capability at Ochsner. And then finally, we haven't announced this publicly, but I guess I will today. You know,
You heard it here first.
we're in discussions with Xavier University to build a physician assistant, a PA program with them. It's actually harder to get into PA school in Louisiana than it is to get into medical school. There's 65 or 70 PA positions a year in Louisiana. So this will help build more of a pipeline there. I mean, obviously, PAs and nurse practitioners are critically important as we continue to evolve the healthcare system. So we're excited about that partnership. We have a great partnership with Xavier in pharmacy, and I think you'll see us build other disciplines and other opportunities with them going forward.
So how do you view the interplay between destination healthcare and tourism?
So I think they're really related. Yeah, the Mayo Clinic is amazing. But have you ever been to Rochester, Minnesota?
It's Rochester, yeah.
It's Rochester, Minnesota. I mean, it's an amazing place, but there's a lot of people that just don't want to go to Rochester, Minnesota. People want to come to New Orleans, and they want to spend time here. And these are people that can go anywhere. They have the means, they have the capability, they could go anywhere. And so having great health care coupled with amazing tourism, amazing things to do, great hotels, it makes a big difference. So I think they're very, very related. And once again, I think the great work that's been done, you know, by Michael and Mark and the city to expand access at the airport, more direct flights. We're going to have a new airport, you know, opening. I think all of those are going to make New Orleans more attractive for these types of relationships. And I think the other thing about, you know, whether we are happy or not with our United States healthcare, other parts of the world want what we have. And healthcare in the U.S. can get a lot better. I'm not going to say it's perfect. It can get a lot better. But it's significantly better than many other areas in the world. And we get asked all the time now to go and help in other parts of the world to help them build their healthcare infrastructure or manage their facilities or help train their people because these evolving and developing countries do not have good healthcare. And that's why many people have traveled. I think that will still happen, but I think there's going to be more opportunities to help other parts of the world develop their own healthcare systems, and we certainly see playing in that area.
And as far as destination healthcare, I understand that the U.S. is still number one. This is still the place where most people in the world will come to get healthcare.
It is. I mean, I think the challenge we have is when you said cost doesn't matter. Actually, cost does matter because you know, folks will be paying a lot of this out of pocket, or they may be insured internationally, and the insurance companies internationally do have deals in different parts of the world. So, if you look at some of the big hospitals in India or in you know, in Europe, they definitely have a lot of folks that are traveling to those facilities. So we have to make sure that we're cost competitive. From a quality perspective, you know, we certainly rank with anyone in the world, you know, the United States, the best place in the United States. And I think lots of times when you hear well, you know, we don't have as good outcomes as other parts of the world, it's actually around, you know, health statistics more than clinical outcomes in hospitals. The health statistics compared to other parts of the world, yes, I mean, I think we do lag there, but there's a lot of social issues behind that, not necessarily driven by the healthcare system. So from a health clinical outcomes perspective, the United States, the best of the United States, you know, rank amongst the best in the world.
Yeah, Louisiana isn't high up on that healthiest states list.
It isn't, and you know, it's something at Ochsner. I mean, that's a whole another. We can do another panel on that sometime. But I think it is about personal behavior. It is about taking care of ourselves. I mean, if you look at the, you know, 24% of the people in Louisiana smoke. I mean, we're the leading state in the country for obesity. And these are all indications for diabetes, cancer, these type of indications. So we take them seriously. We're working hard on prevention with a lot of our patients and our patient base. But it's something that is going to take all of us kind of, you know, linking arms and working together on that.
So when we're talking about destination healthcare, there's the people coming from all the different countries around the world, but there's also domestic tourism as well. And how do we do in that arena?
I think we do well, and we're doing better than we have, I would say, in the last 20 years. And I think, once again, I think part of it is because New Orleans is a more attractive city today than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I think that, we like to think that our reputation certainly nationally has improved dramatically in the past 10 years. Ochsner took a big bet after Katrina on New Orleans, and that bet has paid off well. But people are looking at that name. They're willing to travel for it. I mean, if you look between really Atlanta and Houston, Ochsner, Birmingham's a great place, but they're more research oriented than clinical care oriented. And Ochsner is much more clinical care oriented than research oriented. It's good to have both, but obviously when people are looking to be cared for and where they're going to travel to, they want to go to the place that can deliver the best care.
So let's bring Mark into the conversation here on the end. So how is this viewed by your organization, the destination healthcare? How much of a priority is it?
Well, it hasn't been the priority that it should be, and I think we can challenge ourselves to do a better job. Obviously, we have the infrastructure, and that keeps improving. We have some 39,000 hotel rooms within the greater New Orleans area, and as we all know, short-term rental the assets are increasing there. So when you think about our hospitals and where individuals can come and be treated, the hotels are around the area, and that's an easy play for them. So we talk about leisure travelers coming in. It's supporting an industry that employs more than 86,000 people. As you said earlier, we set some records last year in both visitor spending and visitation. And so we're exposing people to the New Orleans brand. We have, with advice from Michael and other economic development organizations, we've tried to move the messaging away from that the French Quarter. We love the French Quarter. 98% of the people that visit New Orleans find themselves in the French Quarter. But we have so many other assets to speak to. We're a family destination, so we think we're adding to the attractiveness of New Orleans as a destination by speaking to more of the assets around the region. However, we have not really done, I think, the job that Warner and Michael have alluded to that we can do as it relates to New Orleans as a medical destination, as a healthcare destination. Though we have an opportunity with the Tricentennial to speak to the history of what has occurred here with research and the clinicians that have treated so many people from around the world, and tie that to the present day. So as we go into the Tricentennial, our campaign theme is about the great stories that have come out of New Orleans over the last 300 years, and we can find those same stories for the great work that's occurred at Ochsner and the great work that's occurred at Tulane and the LSU hospitals, and tie that all together and remind people how important New Orleans has been in the past and how we are important now going into the future. So listening to this conversation, I'm glad I was sort of a spectator, because it pauses and causes me to say we can do a better job in discussing that and working with Michael's organization and NOLA Business Alliance and others to speak to the good work that's happened here and tie it into New Orleans as a great place to visit. Price points for every family. The average visitor stays here 4 days, 4.5 days. The average medical destination visitor is going to be here for weeks, perhaps months, and that's an interesting thought as far as the economic impact of that visitor to our economy.
So going forward, how do you get the word out, and how do you push it more as New Orleans is known as a place to have a great time, So how do you push that?
Well, it's delivering that message
side, yeah.
as often as possible in ways that will capture the mind of the visitor. So whether it's at the airport, half the visitation to New Orleans comes via the airport. The other half is a drive-in or other modes of transportation. But visually, you can, and we do that. And I see advertising at the airport where you can remind people about what is happening here from a medical standpoint. We can work with the B2Bs, the business journals and the medical journals to tell that story. And again, we can do a much better job. We don't do the good job that we should on that.
So what would you consider some of our advantages and disadvantages in that arena?
One is airlift. Obviously, we can do a much better job, and we are. Thank you, Michael, for what you've done with working with the Aviation Board and the city to make New Orleans an attractive port for airlines to use. Copa's destination now into Panama, and from there, I believe they can reach 40 plus other destinations in Central and South America. That's an important tool, and we can certainly work better with them on that. But having Copa in the marketplace is tremendous. The British Air, the Condor Air service now, the nonstop service into Europe and the United Kingdom, is another way to get the message out, and looking for ways to take the medical destination story with those airlines and those marketing departments. The tools are there. We just need to employ ourselves in a better way with them.
Have we seen with all the international destinations that we've seen the past few years, have we seen an increase in medical tourism at all because of that?
I'm going to pass that to Warner. Obviously, you're seeing visitation from around the world.
I think we are seeing an increase. I would say the increase is more domestic, so no more in the national than international business, although the international business continues to grow. I would just say from a percentage growth and from a numbers perspective, I would say it's more national than international. I think there's large international opportunities. We have projects that we're considering right now in Nigeria, the sub-Saharan Africa area. We're looking at some things in the Middle East. We're looking at some opportunities in building more relationships in the Caribbean and Central America. So I think all of those will build on, more connections, more patients traveling, broader reach of the brand. And once again, I think New Orleans is a attractive place for people to want to go to. I mean, you talk about saying, okay, you're going to travel, you're going to go to New Orleans. I mean, it is a draw. It's not an aversion. I think what we have to do, and I think we got to be more collaborative on this, is that I think build on the brands that do have national and international reach, like Ochsner, and leverage together. Leverage the New Orleans brand and the Ochsner brand together. And I think those are the things that will probably help us broaden and deepen the draw, around the country and around the world.
So our domestic medical tourism is pretty strong. Are there certain regions of the country that we tend to pull from more, or certain states?
I would say, certainly we see it in the Southeast primarily. I would say if you look at scattergram where people are coming from, it's primarily in the Southeast. But Mid-Atlantic, pretty good draw out of the Mid-Atlantic area. Some from the West Coast, depending upon the program, some from the West Coast. So it really is somewhat program oriented, but I would go back to Michael's point. So neuroscience is a great one. So our neuroscience program in U.S. News is ranked in the low 20s, about 22 or 23. Amazing clinicians. There really is not a MD Anderson type entity for neuroscience in the country. Okay. I mean, when people think about cancer care, they think MD Anderson or they think Sloan Kettering. If I said to you, okay, neuroscience, you would say, well, where do you go? And you'd probably say, well, if you're thinking national, you might just say, well, I guess I go to a Mayo or a Cleveland because there's no one that kind of has that brand. We do have an opportunity to do something very different and very special there. We certainly have the clinical capability. We're trying to build more research partnerships in that area. Recently we had a patient come out of Puerto Rico that was challenged, based on the storm and the storm conditions there. It was covered nationally. And so I think there are opportunities specifically in that area to do something new and innovative and different, which could make us much more of a draw. Cancer care, we see a big draw from a cancer care perspective, and Ochsner has a long history in the surgical cancer care areas. We're doubling our Benson Cancer Center. We're going to break ground on that in the next couple of weeks. We got an amazing gift from the Benson family to help do that. And when we built that center about 6 years ago, we thought it was a 10 or 15-year project, and we were essentially at capacity in 5 years. So we're now having to double that. Now, it's obviously a negative thing because we don't want folks to have cancer, but it's a positive thing in that we got a great place to take care of them. We have the team to take care of them. So there are many opportunities, I believe, that we can build on together I think we got to break down some of the barriers, and I know there was mentions of UMC and those folks do a great job. I don't think nationally, internationally, they're really known. So I think we got to take the national and international brands like a New Orleans, like an Ochsner, put them together and build on them. And there'll be ancillary benefits for everyone in doing that. So I think we got to kind of break down the barriers a little bit and put the strong brands together and really go at this together. That's what Houston's done, and I think they've done an amazing job there. I think there are other parts of the country that are trying to be much more destination-oriented with healthcare.
The way that I like to think about it, and this goes back to the point that Warner was making, is that it's not about the buildings, it's about the people. I'll use a sports analogy because we understand that here. If you look at places that have been successful with destination healthcare, I think there's 3 components to it, and so we'll talk football. First, you got to build the Superdome, because you do need the building, because the doctors and the researchers have to be somewhere. And that's good, but it's not if you build it, they will come. Then you need the top talent, the top researchers, the top clinicians in the world, and that's the heart. So that's the Drew Brees and the offensive line. So now you've got your dome, now you've got your franchise player and the team around him or her, and that takes money. The building takes money. Attracting and keeping the talent takes a lot of money. And then finally, you got to promote it. You've got to go out there and sell yourself, as well as the NFL sells itself around the world now in places like London on the British Airways flight. You put those 3 things together, and then over a period of not years, but decades, this is not a quick fix, you can build a reputation and become a global center, and then it becomes, I think, then you're in the virtuous cycle of regeneration, but it's the building, and then the people, and then selling it, and you got to do all 3.
So where are we on those 3 things?
I just want to dovetail off that. So if you look at the Superdome, we're 5-2, we're leading our division. You look at San Francisco, they just built a brand new stadium. They spent tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. They're 0-8. So the stadium really, it's great, but it's what happens inside the stadium that matters every day. And I just want to go back to one thing that Mark said. I mean, the hotel industry here and what's been done in the hotel industry here and the lift in the past few years has been amazing. I know there's a lot of more construction kind of coming, but it's you've got to be able to get a place or find a place to stay. It's got to be I think the new World Trade Center project, when that's complete, it's going to be an amazing project and really another signature ad for the city. So I applaud the folks that are putting that together. But these are things that unfortunately, you look at that and it took forever to get it done because of litigation and crazy situations. But that's what holds us back, And I think we've got to bust these silos down and say, you know what? If we collaborate and any one entity wins, we all win. Because every time we get a win, the World Trade Center is a win. That's good for the city. It's good for Ochsner. It's good for you. It's good for all of us. And so we've got to stop worrying about who wins and who loses and just say we all win together. And I think that, and let's have a little bigger thinking about making the city better, making it bigger, having more folks want to come here, and not worrying about fighting over the same pie. We got to make the pie bigger.
I wanted to 2 things. One, we're in a building that attracts many medical-related conventions, associations. So the convention center and the CVB, the New Orleans CVB, do an amazing job reaching out to those executives that are surrounding those associations and meetings and ensuring that they enjoy themselves, that they they leave with good feelings about the city, and hopefully that in turn creates ambassadors for New Orleans around the world, and they speak about New Orleans as a destination. Speaking of collaboration, we could do a better job, and we could do this, Warner, with your team. New Orleans has sort of a top 10 destination pull or draw. Obviously, Louisiana, Baton Rouge is our biggest group of, by percentage, people who come into New Orleans and spend the night. But Texas, Mississippi, and then California. California ranks number 4 in the number of people that are coming into New Orleans. So there's got to be an overlap there of who you're seeing, who's coming to the city, and how we can message in a better way. And then Canada being the number 1 international source of visitors for us.
I'm going to give the mic right back to you, but I want to just brag on you for a second. I don't know if folks realize this, but New Orleans was #1 in the country for increase in international visitors last year. And that's before really we get the BA effect or Condor. We beat Dallas when we beat Seattle, 35% increase. And that's because of the work of the tourist agencies, the hospitals that are attracting patients. And so it's beginning to empirically kind of show that it's working.
And to finish that thought, the Louisiana Office of Tourism, through the Lieutenant Governor's Office, coordinates with the CVB International Department, led by Kim Priaz under the leadership of Stephen Perry. And they have tourism offices in some major capitals around the world. So again, as we grow and do things better, we can do a better job working with the State Office of Tourism and getting the word out globally about this location as a medical destination.
How would you describe our brand overseas?
Not as good as we'd like. Obviously, the Tricentennial gives us an opportunity to kind of remind the rest of the old world that we're relatively young. When we talk about 300 years in Paris, they're like, well, you're adolescent. But I think it's a strongly known destination. It's always been, how do I get there? And I think we're making it a little bit easier to get to New Orleans. China is pumping so many visitors into the U.S. now, but they're getting as far as Houston and then trying to figure out, how do I get to New Orleans? And so the CVB, hats off to them, have worked very closely with the Houston CVB to say, hey, you want your visitors to be happy in Houston, we can make it easy for them to then hop over by bus or by plane to New Orleans and expand their journey in the U.S. And so we need to look east, the Far East, to see the opportunity that we will have to grow more international visitors to the city.
So this is for everybody. What kind of infrastructure and support is needed to help New Orleans accelerate its role as a destination for healthcare?
We just spoke. Go ahead. You can talk airlift all day.
Yeah, well, so the two things that are critically talked about is the actual the care itself, the research in the care, and then the airlift. And our airport is the second fastest growing airport in the country over the past 10 years, second only to Dallas Love Field, which has Southwest, which can kind of like print enplanement. So the airport's a great success story, and it's binary. You have an international airport and you're in the game, or you don't and you're not. And we do now, which is great. But this gets back to the basic message, which I think is relevant on both realms. Maybe let's see if you agree. When the mayoral candidates have asked, what do we need to do for economic development? I've said it's not about incentives. It's not about like Chardonnay and cheese cubes. It's about dealing with 4 issues: crime, corruption, flood, and education. If you take care of those quality of life issues in New Orleans, I promise you everything else will resolve in a positive way.
So and how is that related to destination healthcare?
Because people want to go someplace where they think they're going to be safe.
Yeah. So on back to Ochsner. So the neurology component is very important, and that's something that you guys are really pushing. Are there other? You kind of alluded to. There's some pediatrics work that you guys are doing. What are the kind of maybe the top few, not just neurology? What are the top? Yeah. Where are you really focusing?
So we really have 6 areas that we're focused on from a center of excellence destination center. The first being neurosciences that you mentioned, and certainly a lot going on in that area. I would agree with Michael that we're just going to see more and more prevalence of neurological types of diseases as we see the aging of the population. There's been more progress made in the last 10 years than probably in the previous 30 in the neurological area, but there's a lot to be learned and a lot to be known there. So that'll be one of them. Transplant. So we have one of the largest transplant centers in the country. As I said, our liver transplant program, #1. And we transplant people from all over the U.S. Now I'll give you guys a little heads up, a little primer. So there's some folks in town that want to take a good story and make it a bad story. So we do transplant very few international patients, and it's going to be made into some sort of bad story that we're transplanting all these people coming from all over the world, when it's like 2 or 3%, which is about what Mayo Clinic is and about what Cleveland Clinic is. And it's going to be tried to turn into a bad story because we're putting, U.S. organs in people that come from other parts of the world. And it's like, why do we have to take things that are good and make them bad? So you'll get a preview. So I already have given you kind of the preview of the big story that's going to come up in the next few days. And I'm just like, I don't understand. This is an example of why do we take good things and make them bad? You feel an op-ed coming. There we go. So, yeah, I mean, we do transplants from international patients, but it's very few. And, that's just the reality. So does Mayo, so does Cleveland, so does New York Presbyterian, so does UCSF in San Francisco. But anyway, you'll see the story. I don't know what it's going to look like. I just know we've been asked about commenting on it. So that's one transplant, but we have people that come from all over the country. We actually are a destination center for Kaiser Permanente Northern California. So Kaiser sends a lot of their Northern California, San Francisco patients to Ochsner for transplant because we have a shorter waiting list than they do in San Francisco and Los Angeles. So average waiting list here is about 2 months. Average waiting list in, say, San Francisco is 16.
Oh, wow.
So it's hugely different. And, obviously you're only listed for a certain amount of time and then you could pass. So it's a big issue. The other area is in cancer care. So we're doing a lot in cancer care and cancer research. And then the other few would be cardiac care, which Ochsner's been known for years, going back to Alton Ochsner and John Ochsner. And then women's care and pediatric care. So those are really the 6 that we're focused on. Going back to your comment or question earlier, what else do we need? And I would agree with everything that Michael said. You got to be safe. We had a doctor that came in and was, stay at the Brent House Hotel. There are not a lot of restaurant options on Jefferson Highway. We're trying to fix that. If anybody wants to put a restaurant out there, come on aboard. Perfect. That's what we need. Walked down the street, went into a little place, got some food, got robbed while they were in there. That person didn't come and join us. They decided to go someplace else. But, we have to make sure we have a safe environment for folks. And generally that's not an issue. But people read the negative stuff in the newspaper. I think once they get here and they look around and they see what it's like, it's very different. But, the news obviously, creates impressions and views from folks. So in addition to that, I think research is the other thing. We are not a big enough research center. And there's a lot more that could be done in the research area. Ochsner is making some investments there, but this is where collaboration could be big. And we could do a lot more to bring more research dollars into New Orleans. And that would help create a bigger brand for the city. And I think would attract more folks. It would attract pharma companies, biopharmaceutical companies. So I think you'd see more happening there. So I think that's another option that would help draw folks in.
So the head of the Bioinnovation Center has been pretty vocal about talking about the lack of funding and that there has been a drop there. How do you see that going forward?
So we don't know each other that well, but in all candor, it's about results, right? So I think people fund things that show results. Right. And I think if there were results, I think you'd see more funding going there. So I think now you have to take some bets on things, and I think that's fair. But I think we got to be able to show progress and show results, and that's going to take all. And look, we can probably do more there as well. So I'm looking in the mirror, not out the window when I make that comment. So we all have to show better results and maybe make commitments that, okay, if we get X amount of funding, if we get 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, whatever it is, let's be clear about what we're going to get out of it on the back end. Louisiana Cancer Research Center, it's amazing building. I think the question is, what has come out of it? It's been tens of millions of dollars that have gone in. And if I was in the state, or I would say, what are the outcomes? So I think we've got to be able to deliver results, and whether it's in research, clinical care, whatever it is, and I think that then will get more funding. And it won't just get state funding, it'll get private funding. People will be willing to bet on those types of things. And so just being very open about it, but I think that's the reality of the world we're in today.
This gets back to one thing that I talked about before, and then a bigger issue, which Mark and we talk about sometimes. So the thing before is that there is a lack of understanding at the state level, at the legislative level, of the difference between a clinical hospital and research and destination healthcare. They kind of all get lumped together, and they're seen as kind of something you do for the community, and it's so much more than that. The other thing is that it goes back to the state budget. The state has been, disinvesting now as we're starting to turn around or to level out in investing in so many things that are fundamental to future success, investing in physical infrastructure, investing in our institutions of higher learning, investing in medical research. And until we begin to take a generational view of success, we're not going to get there. I mean, Research Triangle Park in the Carolinas took 50 years, but it took a bunch of tobacco fields and turned it into what it is today. But it was multi-generational to get there, and so we've got to fix those state-level, almost strategic issues about where we invest for the future if we want to, get the right investments in research, I think.
Yeah, the only other comment I would make on that is I think that I think the state is, obviously our state has their own budget issues, and I don't think anybody would really want to be governor right now facing the economic situation that is there. It's a very tough situation. I think one of the things we also have to do is sometimes instead of just adding more, you need to take a step back and say, okay, what do we have and are we using it appropriately? Is it being directed in the right way? Is it being managed right? It's like give your kid the allowance. It's like, well, what did you spend your last allowance on? Let's kind of look at that first before you want more. And I think we need to think about where we're spending money today, and should that get reallocated and potentially have a different outcome. I don't know, because I don't know where all the dollars go, but that might be another way to think about it if you wanted to potentially try to have a different outcome.
So this is for everybody. What would be the top thing on your wish list as far as if you could snap your fingers and have one thing happen? Can't wait to hear that. That would really help as far as destination healthcare is concerned.
To be able to focus some ad dollars with this specific message. We do, I think, a pretty decent job putting out that leisure, come to New Orleans and see something authentic and unique, the New Orleans region, Louisiana State as well. But to be able to devote, if not as many, a good portion of the same amount of dollars to telling the story. This is a story that just needs to be told better.
Yeah, I agree. Besides more wishes, which I don't think is an answer that's allowed,
Cheating.
it would be at every level for destination healthcare, for experiential tourism, for economic development in general. It would be a more accurate perception of the diversity of what's here and the quality of what's here in Greater New Orleans beyond just Bourbon Street.
You only get one? Okay. You wanted more wishes.
I asked
That's
you
actually
for your top,
that's a pretty good. It's a
is
Stanford
good.
guy. See, that's how he's. I went to BU. We don't think about that stuff. We just we waste our first wish. I think. I guess I would say to probably more investment to get the story out. I think the other thing is I think we have to bet on the organizations that are doing it, and maybe this is being a little parochial and a little biased, but I think bet on the organizations that are doing it and getting it done versus trying to create different situations that may or may not be able to kind of get there. So I think that. And I think just having an open mind that that healthcare is economic development. I don't think folks generally look at healthcare as being economic development. And we have about a $1.7 billion payroll. We've put a lot of additions on houses and a lot of dry cleaners and a lot of groceries, and so. It makes a lot of cars get sold, so it makes a big difference. It is economic development, and I agree with what Michael was saying. That if you're just recycling, resources, that's one thing. But the other thing we have to understand here is that people leave New Orleans for healthcare every day.
Yeah.
And they leave Louisiana for healthcare all the time. So my big message is, let's be good enough and get the word out so we keep people at home. Why should someone have to leave Louisiana to get amazing healthcare? And actually, they don't. The reality, when you go to MD Anderson, there's probably 0.5% things that they do that we don't do. And many times we see this with hundreds of patients. Go to MD Anderson, get a second opinion. They go, if I was you, I'd go right back to Ochsner. But there's going to be that 0.5% that, yes, you need to go there because it's an esoteric cancer that there's very few of them, and they are the best of the best. And I would go there too. For 99.5% of the other things, you stay home. So I think we've got to continue to do a better job keeping people here and then attracting more folks to see this as a potential and to see the amazing things we can do together. And frankly, New Orleans is a lot easier to get around than Houston. It's a lot friendlier city than Houston. No offense, I hope no one's from Houston here. We talk about it's hard to get to New Orleans. It's really hard to get to Rochester, Minnesota. So I think if we have the right message and we have the right approach and we come out with the right thinking about it, I think we'll attract more folks because we have so many other things going for us. We just got to kind of put it all together.
So it sounds like it's an issue of education and of getting the word out, and then that's kind of a common theme for all three of you. How, with that being the goal, what's our path to get there?
I think that it's about persistence and repetition and just overwhelming force. I mean, we didn't build the brand of Bourbon Street overnight. We built it and reinforced it over 300 years plus. And so we're not going to change it overnight. But I think that actually the new Orleans that is emerging post-Katrina is one that I think is beginning to be perceived as a broader place, as a more dynamic place. But it's just going to take, honestly, many, many years of getting the message out as pervasively as possible, and also recognizing that it takes 10 pieces of good news to overcome one piece of bad news, and that's just the ratio that we work with.
And I'll commit today to, as we go into our planning for the rest of the 18 media plan, and then, of course, into the 19 budget year, to work more collaboratively, to peel off some of those tax dollars that we work with. We get monies from the hotel tax and some other fees to build it around that specific visitor here for a medical need. I mean, selfishly speaking, that visitor is going to stay longer, unfortunately, most likely. Most likely we'll have family members here going in and out. From the economic standpoint, the impact is huge. It's like the international visitor that when they take a trip to the U.S., they're not staying 4.5 days. They're here for a couple of weeks at least. So we could do a better job on our end and work with the various economic development organizations to do that, and with the Ochners.
Is that something the tourism, the hotel industry understands and is kind of behind that value of that?
I think they're aware of it, but I
tourist?
think they can be more aware of it. And I think working with the Greater New Orleans Hotel Lodging Association, Mavis Early, and the board there to bring them up to speed as to the impacts that are happening now and what could happen in the future as we keep growing this industry. So there you have it. We can do a better job, and we will.
I don't know how we're doing on time. Should we start with some questions from the audience? Okay.
One question I just want to put out there, because I know Michael has to leave early after this, but I know Ochsner's in 50 plus countries, and so putting on the international cap and bringing this all under the vein of kind of this global context, is there a strategy in terms of working on outreach for destination healthcare with our major trade partners, being Mexico and Canada? Being a Canadian, there's so many Canadians that actually come south for a number to receive healthcare, a number of specialty areas. Is that on your radar, and is there a specific strategy on how we can do more trade with groups like the Canadians and get them down south? They love to travel south, but they're mostly going to Florida right now.
So how can we get the Canadians down here?
Well,
Besides the weather. Besides
free
the
beer.
weather and the beer.
So I think there are a couple
Hockey
things.
team.
So one is again, it comes back to international connectivity. So we have the Air Canada flight that does great up to Toronto YYZ airport. I have to leave in a second because we have a big announcement, actually 3 announcements down at Mishu. But one of the companies that we're going to be announcing is a company that comes out of Turkey and Liechtenstein. And the principal out of Turkey has already said that they've spoken to plug your ears, Eliana, to Turkish Airways, and that they're interested in maybe having a direct New Orleans-Istanbul flight. And so that kind of thing opens up a whole new possibility. I'm not sure if it's Istanbul or Constantinople, but one of the two. And, sorry. Yeah, that might be Giant's joke. But the point is that there's some very physical things you have to do, and then it's about, again, education. So we have a trip to London that we're planning with British Airways in January called London Calling, and one of the things we're going to be doing is talking about the medical opportunities in biomedical and the healthcare here in New Orleans. And again, it's a slow but accretive process over time.
Yeah, I would just say that I think there's probably more, getting back to kind of getting the message out, I think there's more we could just do in trying to figure out the right advertising or marketing approach. We'd be willing to put funds into it and, match funds from the tourism area, and because it's important to us as well. And I do think that just continuing to communicate that this is an opportunity, it's really not a message that probably is in our top 3 or 4 that we lead with, frankly. So I think if we get in the top 3, 4, or 5, I think it will help continue to change the dialogue.
So are we going to open it up to questions from the audience? Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Yes.
See you, man.
Thank you, Michael.
Great.
I'll just have you call it out, and I'll repeat it. Not a problem.
I actually came from the medical center area of Houston. My hotel, out of $11 million, $8 million came directly from Texas Medical, mostly from MD Anderson. Part of that was because of the patient travel services. There was a major collaboration between the hotels, with the institution, and then with the individual organizations. You talked about collaboration, the back office, the support. That, for us, that was very key on the hotelier side of making sure not only were we servicing those international travelers, but also making sure we are meeting the needs for whatever those institutions. Is that any? Where does that fall in line with the other priorities of building up, the specialty brands, and then, making sure the word gets out to the tourism boards and then with the Hotel Lodging Association. So it's, they just kind of full force just invested everything all at once. New Orleans were a little different. So.
That's a lot to condense down. So we're talking about specifically like partnerships as far as traveling, getting people places to working with the hotels and the hospitals. So that connection between the hotels and the hospitals, is that something that you guys see?
Yeah, I think it's something we would be very interested in. I mean, we have a hotel on the Ochsner campus, but it's full most of the time, and it's frankly, it's not a 5-star hotel. So it would be nice to, and we don't really have necessarily preferred hotels that we work with. So I think it would be good to identify a few that want to work more directly with us. A real challenge is transportation and figuring the transportation piece out. The nice thing is that Ochsner's not that far outside of downtown, but it is, it's further than you got to have the right transportation. So we'd be very open to talking to a handful of hotels, figuring out the right connections, do some joint marketing of that if folks are looking for a different option. Now, some folks want to stay on campus and they'll trade off, hey, I can be in the hotel and walk over to see my loved one in 5 minutes versus having to go. But some that may be here for longer, that may have follow-up visits and whatnot, may want to have a hotel downtown or some other place and be willing to travel. So happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, and I think repeating this panel in front of the Hotel Association would be a good start. We also have the Concierge Association here, and I think getting the word out about the needs that the visitors that are staying in those specific hotels have around this. Just, again, raising the awareness of the need, because they're all about servicing and providing great service to their hotel guests. And also, we talk about short-term rentals. There are more and more people, maybe perhaps in this room, who are part of the short-term rental movement, and making those individuals aware of the opportunity around this case. But I believe we have discovered in speaking today the need for much more education and awareness of the potential.
I just add one other comment. I mean, we looked at, so those of you familiar with Jefferson Highway, there used to be that Jefferson Plaza, which was that amazing strip mall that was on Jefferson Highway, which we tore down and now have put a state-of-the-art, post-acute care hospital for, rehabilitation care, skilled nursing care. So these would be folks that actually have a much longer length of stay. Exactly. So someone like a Steve Scalise, kind of post being in the acute care hospital, spent a long time in rehab hospital as well. So, when we built that, we also looked at potentially, should we have a hotel on that site, or should we have a mixed use of, short-term rental plus hotel? But we just, we didn't really want to deploy capital there. But at some point, it will make sense for us to partner with someone to probably have another hotel out in that area, just to supplement what we have and to augment even, downtown, because obviously people would prefer to be closer. We have the Hope Lodge that's on River Road. Ochsner donated the land to have the Hope Lodge built there, which is great for cancer patients. But we probably will need other types of lodging opportunities there, and need to look for the right partnership to get something like that done.
All right. Any other questions? Yes. You know what? I'm going to come down there.
Just a comment, and to play on the analogy of the sports analogy, it seems like we need a playbook, and for this, an overall game plan. And the leaders in the hospitality industry and leaders in the healthcare have counterparts in Houston and other that we can learn from. It seems like that there's, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The convention center is going out and looking at, the whole convention center industry, and what do we need to do to really continue to be on the cutting edge, having a world class. So it seems like that we could learn from, many of you your counterparts in other parts of the cities, that we could learn on and accelerate, and sort of jumpstart this.
All right. Anyone else? Yes.
So we talked a lot about destination healthcare for medically necessary procedures. I'm curious to know if there are efforts that you guys are taking for more of the medical tourism side, for optional procedures that people say, hey, I want to go get my nose fixed, and I might as well do it in New Orleans because, the recovery's pretty quick and I can take a few days and eat some great meals while I'm at it. So I'd love to hear more about your efforts in that space.
So I would say that it's probably not the top priority we have at this point in time. We are building a much more robust cosmetic service at Ochsner. It's probably primarily in breast reconstruction for breast cancer patients. And however, we'll be looking at more cosmetic type of procedures as well. It's probably not something that we're necessarily known for, but we do see a big need in that area. But that's something that it's an interesting idea, something we should consider. Probably be more of a regional than a national service. I think normally you would see folks are probably not going to travel nationally for that, but they may travel regionally. So just some thoughts on it.
Anyone else? Any other questions for our panel? Yep, in the back.
Hi, I'm Eliana Thompson with British Airways, and I know that you mentioned Ochsner has campuses in 50 different countries, and obviously there's the international outreach component. Has there been any conversations, or is there interest in having conversations on Ochsner and the healthcare facilities in the state with airlines such as British Airways, Copa, Air Canada, all the different airlines that we're talking about, potentially Turkish Air? That sounds good.
Yeah, I think we would absolutely like to have discussions. So just to correct, we don't have locations in 50 different countries. We have people that come from 90 countries that travel to us. So we don't have outposts in all those different areas. Now, we have considered, essentially referral centers in these various locations, some of the bigger areas to help coordinate care for patients, whatnot. But we certainly would love the opportunity to talk to you and talk to the other airlines about things that we could be doing differently, things that we could promote together to change the dialogue. I think part of this, how do we change the message and change the dialogue? So we'd love to have that discussion.
And the British Airways success here in New Orleans is wonderful. Hopefully some of you have experienced the service. But the travel to get here for the service to actually begin was a hard-fought battle to ensure that we had the catchment area to fill those seats, particularly the business class seats, what would you consider to be the club section seats. So things are going very well there, but I think we can tell the story better on board the plane through the British Airways magazine, through some earned media, where we take a position in there, perhaps editorially or advertorially, and tell that great story of the number of people who visit Ochsner and how British Airways can be a great connection to do that. So again, I've uncovered all sorts of projects sitting up here today to keep me busy. Look forward to working with Warner to make that happen. But congratulations, by the way, to British Air for finding New Orleans and being with us.
Absolutely. All right, it looks like we have another question here in the front.
Corrado Giaccona, Chair of the Advisory Board. Clint, years ago, we were looking at the NOCVB creating zones in the city for tourism. Magazine Street, the lakefront. The idea was to spread the wealth and extend the stay in New Orleans by having more zones of connectivity and interest, much like when you take a cruise to someplace and they're moving you all around the island or wherever you're going to get you interested. Certainly, medical opportunities could be involved in that in the medical zone. Signage, and then we were also working on the idea of that each hotel in the city would have a programmed information to disseminate to the visitor as to what was going on in each of those zones, opportunities to experience and things to do, extending the stay and making more available. What do you think of the idea?
So in 2013, we actually moved in that direction with our messaging about Follow Your NOLA. So it was about not only the French Quarter and downtown, but the areas outside of the traditional hospitality areas. So it'd be the Bywater, Mid-City, Lakefront, Uptown, Algiers. We started really pushing the economic impact of tourism out by messaging that as much as possible. You might remember several years ago we also tried to create the hospitality zone, which did not meet with much excitement by certain individuals. So we put that aside, but we have been doing our part, I think, to push the spending around. Now, again, we can do a much better job and tell specific zone stories better, and we will. But we picked up on that great advice that began several years ago and started to do that.
All right, last chance. Any other questions? Yep, all right, here we go.
Good morning. Barbara Waiters with the Downtown Development District. Warner, you mentioned talking about Ochsner's clinical outcomes versus the research outcomes. And I think there's tremendous opportunity for us to kind of frame the story. I know, Mark, you mentioned telling the story, but I think we have to frame the story by gathering and inventorying our assets when it comes to clinical outcomes and also opportunities for research, because we have the academic medical research centers, University Medical Center and Tulane. I would like to know what would be a great approach in kind of breaking down those barriers, as you said, Warner, and looking at Ochsner already has a model and a successful model with the liver transplant having a national people come in nationally to go to Ochsner for that service as well on the clinical side. But I do see there that there's tons of opportunity to collaborate in order to get resources from the legislature and also grants for research if we work together on the research side. So what would you think would be a good approach to starting that strategy and breaking down those barriers and building collaboratives?
That's a great question. There hasn't been a lot of collaboration, frankly, even between the two universities in this area, and it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of where we are. So, perhaps the first step is to try to pick a project that made sense. So we've had discussions with LSU around cancer research, neuroscience research, because we have a big clinical capability. They have a much larger research capability than we have, but trying to get it put together has just been extremely difficult. And I can't sit here and tell you the reasons why. I don't know if it's different priorities. I don't know if it's, I'm not quite sure what it is. I think part of it is, once again, we're not going to make tens of millions of dollars of investments in research. We'd like to collaborate and not duplicate effort. I think that there sometimes is a view that, okay, if we partner up in research, then we're going to lose out on being able to deliver the clinical care. I think that's maybe sometimes what the universities think, that folks then won't go downtown for cancer care or down to LSU, to UMC or to Tulane for their medical care. And the reality is many of them don't anyway. I mean, that's just the reality of the world that we're in today, if you just look at kind of the size and scale. So I think probably trying to pick one thing to work on and seeing if we can get some, I think cancer and or neuroscience are probably the right places, just given the importance of research to those disciplines, and just try to get some small wins and try to build from there.
All right, if we are out of questions, we're going to go ahead and thank our panel for being with us today.